This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is an award-winning marketing and communications professional. His experience with the creative process and visual communications has allowed him to work on numerous creative projects, as well as internationally awarded film documentaries. We're definitely going to get into that. Avid, a learning audio video editing production software company, recognized him for his content creation skills and storytelling ability. In addition to running his own boutique creative marketing firm, we'll name that in a little while. I don't want to give away who a special guest is. He is a past president of the American Marketing Association, New York Capital Region chapter. He thrives in fast-paced, creative environments and enjoys training and speaking with audiences about marketing, design, business, career development, and technology. One of his goals is to help elevate the marketing profession and grow the business community. He does so in many ways. Please welcome my new friend and guest, Michael Roach, founder and owner of Michael Roach Creative. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, Michael.
Awesome to have you on the show. First off, I can't forget, I almost forgot about this, and I can't forget to ask you this. So before we even get into anything specific about business, what I want to know is, I went to your LinkedIn page and I noticed that you are connected to my cousin, Patrick Flourville, who also ran a marketing and design firm in New York City. And I was interested on the connection.
Oh, wow. Geez. I think that might have been,
many moons ago.
Many moons ago. Yeah. I'm really intentional about connecting with people in the marketing industry that are doing really great things. And so, I found him. It was like, I loved what he was doing and I loved what he was posting. So it made sense to connect with him and see what he was all about.
Yeah, that's really cool. When I saw that, I was like, all right, that's really cool, because I know he's also very intentional about his connections on LinkedIn. And so to see the two of you connected, and especially with what you do and what he does in design and branding, I just figured that there had to be some sort of synergy there, and I thought that was really cool. All right, back to a couple things here that I mentioned in your bio.
Yeah.
One of them is Avid, and I want for you to maybe express to our audience what Avid is. I remember Avid because I did graduate Marist with a communications degree, so I did radio, TV, film, which here we are in a podcast studio, living out my dream, man.
Right, yeah,
who said you can't live the dream?
Right, absolutely.
Right, and I remember editing on Avid. But obviously this award and this recognition is huge because Avid is a big player in the editing space. And so if you could just share a little bit about that with our audience and what it meant to you.
Sure. So what I did with Avid, I was working on a creative project where I was marrying music, science, and art, and really trying to tell a story with the technology. And I sat down for many hours trying to figure out, like, how can I use this? I was learning about video editing. I kind of immersed myself into it and really wanted to get to know this tool. And that's kind of what I did. I learned the tool. I was already using tools like Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and playing with a lot of different filters in Photoshop, of course, too. But then that's where I really got a fascination with video editing, telling a story with video and music and content and writing and things like that.
Yeah, I remember Avid having the really cool keyboard with all the colors on it, which I guess is probably still happening in the industry today.
Oh, yeah.
But for us home editors using like a Mac or a Final Cut Pro or whatever, which is what I use, I don't have that keyboard. I'm interested in kind of like the contrast to the two. Like, so again, I just mentioned I do my video editing at home and I use Final Cut Pro, which is a Mac software. I'm interested in the difference between using something like that, which is maybe like, I'm sure Windows has its own, and then Mac has this one, and then using a software like Avid. What's the big difference that you notice between those kinds of?
Right. Yeah. So I was doing it really at home on my home PC, and at the time I had a lot of memory, I had a lot of drive space, for those hefty files, and so using a tool like Avid really just helps you visualize things on that timeline, moving from like my earlier experiences with using like Windows, that video editing tool, and then saying, well, okay, what's the difference? How can I utilize these pieces of content, cut them up, re-import them or reuse them, or use stock video for certain kinds of things? So it just took me, gave me a good idea how to create these multi-dimensional pieces of content. And then flash forward into now, I'm using tools like Adobe Premiere, After Effects, and it's kind of like the same principle. It's almost like the tool doesn't matter. And I think Adobe might be a little mad at me about this, but no, I think the tool doesn't matter. If you have the principles and you have the idea, then I think you can create some wonderful things. And a lot of times when I'm working with students and teaching them about graphic design and storytelling, digital storytelling especially, I tell them start with paper first. And that was the one thing that in working with that project when I was working in Avid really helped me kind of visualize what I was doing ahead of time and then bring it from paper to the screen.
Yeah, I like that you said that too, that the software doesn't matter. I remember as a skier, I was very interested in becoming a ski instructor. And the truth behind it is I just wanted to ski for free. Yeah. That's the truth behind it. So as and this is important for the story, not to pat myself on the back, but as an expert skier, I had to now go down to the bunny hill and learn how to teach at that level first before I can go and teach the expert skiers, right? So they want to have this progression. And it was very tedious, and so I didn't follow through with it. But what I do remember in my first couple sessions that I did to learn to become an instructor is what they did was they had us remove our skis and use their rental skis. And we all had to have the same skis. And at first I was like, why are we doing this? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like, we all spent a lot of money on our skis and they all have these special features and benefits and they complement our skiing styles and all these different things. And so, I'm just like, why the heck are we doing this? And one of the instructors, she asked the group, she said, why are we doing this? And a couple of people had their ideas. It was like, to bring us down a notch, Right. But at the end of it, the truth was exactly what you just said. What we want to teach or impress upon our students is it's not the tool. It's the skill. It's learn how to slide on the snow, learn how to get control and balance, learn how to maneuver, and then the skis come secondary. Then all those little nuances come into play. And so I like how I use my skiing analogy, but I like how you shared that of like Avid, like the difference between Avid and these other editing tools out there is that it's not the editing tool, although some have some great, cool little features to them that might enhance your skill, but it really comes down to the bare bones of what is your skill.
Right.
So I like how you kind of like shared that with us.
Sure. And another point about that too, I think it also depends on the person, at the computer, at the screen. Sometimes I think we want to do things, we have these creative ideas, but we never execute on them. And sometimes when I'm working with people, it's kind of motivating them to, okay, you had this concept, let's get this complete. Let's do this one step at a time. You're not going to do the entire project in a day. Just do it in mini pieces. And it's just like putting that film together. You're doing it in pieces and sections and bringing it all together. And then you have this masterpiece at the end that you can say that, hey, I did this and I completed it from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think from my editing experiences, you learn things along the way, which is really cool too. You'll start seeing, which I'm sure this is what you mean by complete the project, is like you'll start noticing, oh, I could blur this, or I can kind of cut this and play with this function or feature, or kind of crop this and move it out and give it like you could give. It's funny. It's animating, right? You're animating this picture or this movement that's happening. and you start getting lost in that. And then, an hour goes by and you're still in like the first like frame and you're like, what did I just do to myself? But in that learning or in that experience, you realize, okay, you know what, like you just said, let me finish at least the editing portion of this, of like getting it clean to what's the story I'm telling, and then maybe go back and add some of these features, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a great parallel to just in you explaining that. I think about writing. I think about pieces of marketing, content strategy, and all those different things. Like if you're writing a piece, whether it be a piece of content for a website or something like that, get it done as a draft first, then go back and edit. But I think sometimes people just stop themselves and they get really inundated with one piece, and then sometimes just never finish.
Right, get lost in the details. Yeah. I want to go to digital storytelling because you mentioned it a few times, and you were recognized for your storytelling abilities in public speaking. So I think you and I, we know this, and I think a lot of my audience knows this, but as a trainer for public speaking and communications, I speak about storytelling a lot. And in fact, a lot of my talks, they are all based around stories. And because it's the learning that you get from the story. And also stories are, they're easier for people to digest. And I have all my different ideas on it, but I'm more interested in your ideas on storytelling and what are some of the, I guess, tips or strategies that you use that helped you get recognized for your storytelling.
Sure. So what I did in trying to understand how I could use storytelling for myself and just looking at the world and seeing how stories come together to make people change their behavior, change their thinking, or change their perspective. It's like there are themes that get played out every time, and they're almost like frameworks. And if you understand the framework, it's almost like an equation. It's almost like putting together a set of ingredients to bake a cake or or some sort of tasty dessert. But if you follow that framework, at its essence, it will produce you some sort of output at the end. And understanding how some of those different frameworks come together will allow you to create some interesting stories. Like, for example, good versus evil. That's a story framework that gets played a lot. I would say every single time, but a lot. And so how could you take that simple concept and expand it out and then turn it into, a good versus evil, or a good something that is great or has a contrast, or something that's bad or not so great and something that's happy at the end, or like a sense of triumph or victory. And I think just in that kind of simple framework, you can talk about your own life story, how you overcame something, how you turned, something that was lemons into, lemonade, right?
Yeah.
And so, and there are a bunch of frameworks that we can all use. I've used them. I've just kind of analyzed these stories. I think reading too and exposing myself to a lot of different things, watching documentaries, reading short stories, looking at poetry, looking at just different creative works, getting ideas from other things, because in a lot of ways, I don't think they're original ideas anymore. I think we're all just not rehashing the same thing, but we're using some of the existing stuff and then putting our own spin to it. And if we can just take a tiny element of ourselves and bring that into that thing that's simple, that simple framework, I think we can create something that's really impactful and entertaining.
I like how you break out into frameworks, because there really are truly only a short number of frameworks out there. And I mean, Shakespeare kind of hit them all for us.
Right.
And then we just kind of build on those. And I'm reading a book. I finished that one, but I'm following Adam Grant. I absolutely love him right now. So I'm on his third book right now. So I believe it was in his second book. It was it might have been in his first book. It was in his first book, Originals. And he speaks about how at first, when The Lion King was pitched to the production studio Disney, it was kind of turned down because they were like, what is this, lions talking and doing things, And it wasn't until they made the correlation of what the story was to the Shakespeare play, not Macbeth. Give me one more. That's a pretty famous one.
Othello.
One more.
Let's
see. You didn't know this was going to be a Shakespeare quiz, did you?
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank on the one that it is, but it doesn't matter for purpose of the story, everyone.
Yes.
See, so sometimes in storytelling, you could just move on from the facts.
Sure.
And we're going to move on from it. But essentially what they did was when they figured out that The Lion King, when the writers and of The Lion King pitched the idea not as a story of these lions, talking lions, let's call it, right? But more as this Shakespearean play in the form of lions, the producers at Disney understood it better. And that's when they said, okay, let's create this. I think was it MacArthur maybe? Does he
King Arthur?
No, it doesn't matter. You know what? We're gonna push through that one there, everyone. But anyway, the point is, like to what you're saying here, is that there isn't really that many original ideas. And so while these writers came up with this idea of these lions talking and, you know, this power struggle between the uncles or the father and the uncle, and then this death, and then this kid kind of coming back and taking ownership of the pride, while they were writing all this out, they may have realized it, but they may not have realized it, that they were just writing out another Shakespearean play. And it wasn't until that connection was made, that Disney kind of bought onto it. So anyway, the point isn't about Disney buying onto it. It's that we really only have so many stories to kind of gain from. And I think that makes it easier for us to tell stories. Because when we figure out, hey, look, we got these 5 or 6 or 10 frameworks to work with, it's like, which one does this internal story work with? And I think that's pretty cool and makes it a lot easier for everybody, kind of like makes the whole experience easier in terms of storytelling, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like those individual like elements or components, you know, the lions, family, you know, and there are a bunch of themes in there, many themes. By themselves, they don't seem exciting, but then when you put them all together, it's like, wait a minute, there's a power struggle, there's emotion, there's drama, there's a sense of loss and grief, but also a sense of growing up, you know, and it's like it takes on a different shape. Yeah. You know, so, and I think even in trying to convey that to the producers or the people that say, yeah, we're going to make this film, you kind of have to tell a story to tell a story. Yes,
and that's what ended up happening. So that's what I was trying to convey in my storytelling here. Part of what got lost in my question too is the question of digital storytelling. Could you share with us what that means?
Right. So that's taking, you know, some of those ideas that we talked about, but then how do you put them in a digital or electronic format?
Okay.
Right. And so is it a video? Is it an audio experience? Is it written content? Maybe it's a mix of all of those different pieces and bringing it all together. And so I'm a big proponent of using storyboarding, which we take from, you know, all the great masters in cinema and in cartooning, and turning those individual frames into ideas that we can use to create that thing in the very end. So when I'm working with people to help them understand something about digital storytelling or getting their story out into a digital format, it's like, let's start with the paper, and then we'll figure out what tools eventually we'll need to create the story, but then chaining it all together. And some things are maybe best used if they're visual. Some things are better audio. And then some things you can use a mix of those things to kind of enhance the experience for the listener or the viewer.
In storyboarding, I'm familiar with it, but I would like if you could just break that out for everybody else who's listening as well, because storyboarding, I've used it and I love it. And we talk about simplifying. So we talk about the framework of storytelling. But storyboarding is like the ultimate simplification, I feel, of storytelling. So could you just share a little bit about what storyboarding is?
Sure. So that's what storyboarding really is taking an idea, something that you, like a story that you want to tell, and bringing it into a number of frames or boxes, if you will.
Like,
right?
I was thinking like comic book.
Yeah, exactly. So like a comic book page, it goes from, you know, one scene to the next scene to the next scene. And they don't necessarily have to be like 1 second in between. It could be a day in between. It could be, you know, moments, right? But there's something that explains what is in that frame and kind of what will happen next. So you can take any general idea of video, let's say, in the marketing world or in business. We might do Instagram stories or Instagram reels or any sort of video content, the YouTube videos that we're putting together. And we could take a piece of paper, turn it into maybe 4 frames, 5 frames, 9 frames, depending on what you're doing. And you can experiment with how many frames it might take to tell your story. Just put down the general ideas. It's almost like an outline that we can use, a visual outline that we can use to see from one step to the next what's happening as we go from beginning to the end. And the juicy stuff that happens in the middle too.
Yeah, I know the significance of it, let's say. I don't use it as much as I should. And when you just said we can use it in reels and things of that nature, I'm interested on some of your tips on that. And again, I always like to give a little bit of reasoning behind it. The whole reason behind this podcast is I want to learn from you, right? Like, that's why I do this. And so I'm putting together my own kind of videos for my website right now for my speaking, for the speaking side of my website. And so I'm in this studio recording video, but I haven't put together the storyboard of what I'm doing. And so what I'm finding is that I'm having a lot of takes. I'm recording, speaking, and then having a lot of takes. And I know that if I would sit down and just plan it out a little bit and storyboard it, it would be much more beneficial to me as I go and hit record. So I guess the next question I have for you is along the lines of preparation or maybe getting our mind right in order to storyboard and prepare to do a recording like that. Maybe how you do that with clients or maybe some of your suggestions.
Right. That's a really good question. So I will try a lot of different things. I'll use a whiteboard. Some people want to see it. They want to, in some cases, draw it. Maybe they want me to draw it. I'll draw it for the client and then show them, have a visual representation for that. Some people prefer to work on paper on a flat surface, kind of horizontal. Other folks want to work in PowerPoint. Other folks want to work in Canva. So I kind of just ask people what they have a preference for. And it's also on your own personal taste. Sometimes people think better if it's in rows and columns. So I guess you could potentially storyboard in Microsoft Excel. I don't know why somebody would do that, but you could. Right, spreadsheet.
Those are for our accountants out there.
Right, exactly. But in a sense of like taking the content for, someone like yourself that is, a speaker, and getting their content out there and talking to different audiences. Like, what are the themes that you want to take or show people that, or as an example, demonstrate that you want to talk to them about or talk to audiences about? What are maybe some highlights or some moments that you want to show in that video content? Some high moments where people are maybe they're showing their faces or showing their emotion, they're clapping, or something hits them in the right space. Those are maybe some key pieces that could be edited and put together in terms of like an entire, speaking reel in a sense. Other things may be, turning that, like taking that video into, a link to connect to a blog article that explains, something about motivation or leadership or, company culture or, working with, folks that may have trouble in the workplace and how you get them, over that hurdle so that they can do wonderful and great things.
Yeah, I've noticed that as I've been doing my recordings, it's like it goes from a 3-minute recording, which we know no one's going to watch when it's kind of like supposed to be just a quick clip, like on a reel of some sort. And what I've done is exactly what you said, trim it down to what is emotion I want to elicit, what's the action I want them to take, and what's in it for them, right? So what's my impact? And I guess for me, my creative process is it's a lot easier for me to verbalize a lot of that. I get, as a speaker, I guess, as a communicator, that's just the way I do it. But I believe that there's easier ways, like with what you're saying in terms of storyboarding. I think that that's definitely much more helpful. And I think I want to make sure that everyone understands that just because we're more inclined to do it one way doesn't mean that trying another way might not help or enhance that other way. So I'm much more inclined to just record myself, hit record, and speak for 3 minutes. and then cut that down into a 1-minute video. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that if I can just create the discipline, I think that that's what I'm missing here. To storyboard ahead of time, I'm going to cut my production time in half.
Right.
I truly believe that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
Something else that you mentioned in the whole storytelling process is exposure to other things. And I think so often we get lost in this whole like grind mentality of we got to be working and hustling all the time. And I know I go over that with my coach all the time. I'm just like, am I working enough? And she's just like, seriously, you asking the question is just enough for me to know what you're doing. What I'm bringing up here is that we dismiss the fact that reading a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, or watching a movie, again, fiction or nonfiction, documentary or non-documentary, or just experiencing life by going for a walk, a hike, a run, being with friends and everything, we dismiss all of those experiences as part of developing our own stories. And I like how you said that exposure to all of those things is kind of what helps you create more stories. So I'm interested in your thought process as to how can our listeners right now, everyone, listen up. How can they take these life experiences and realize that they're not wasting their time? I mean, look, 8 hours of binge watching a show, going out just drinking all night with your pals, doing things that aren't serving you in a healthy mindset, physical world mentality may not be the best storytelling unless you're, a stand-up comic of some sort. We get where I'm going with that one. So how can these people take these experiences and actually translate them into storytelling?
Wow, that's a wonderful question. So I almost see it like we're empty vessels in a way. As we're going through life, and maybe this is a little too metaphysical, but
I like getting metaphysical, man. Let's do it.
So we're empty vessels, and we're collecting experiences as we, get older and we get more experienced, seasoned, if you will. And I think in a lot of ways we're shortchanging ourselves if we don't experience, going outside, and spending some time in nature, checking out some music that we wouldn't normally listen to, going into the bookstore and picking up a book randomly and saying, what's in this? Reading the first paragraph and, seeing if it hits you, in a certain way. So we have, in the short time that we're here, I think we have to kind of gather experiences so that we can maybe leave something for someone else, inspire someone. If we're going to tell our story, if we're going to be a communicator, it's up to us to really take in and absorb things that are going to serve us well. Some of those things may be things that make us happy, and sometimes they might not be things that make us happy as well. There could be things on the other side that make us emotional or make us contemplative or reflect on certain things. So I think it's up to us as communicators to expose ourselves to some of these different things so that when we get on stage, we appear as though we're human, we're authentic, we're genuine, and we come across as sincere, because we want people to change their ideas or maybe their perspective, or help them see a different side of things, or help them walk away motivated, feeling better than when they came in the door. And I think it's up to us to collect those things along the way, almost like we're in a game, playing that game, and we're collecting those things so that we can give them the best experience, something that's well-rounded, robust and seasoned and tasty and zesty. And, maybe in some ways it's sexy at times and maybe not so sexy at times, but we're giving people our best selves when we walk out there, and we're collecting things to help us do that. I felt like I was watching one of your talks right now. That was pretty cool. I love that. That was really awesome. What is one of your strategies on collecting all of that? So we have these experiences. We're doing that, and I like how you said we're empty vessels collecting these experiences. One of my communications mentors, I'll call him, external mentor, because it's a virtual mentor, right? It's like I watch Vin, and I'm like, all right, I just learned something new, and it's awesome. What I like, he says, is to journal on the stories and experiences. And you don't necessarily have to write out the entire experience, but what happened and how did you feel from it?
and so that we could remind ourselves. Is that one of the strategies you use, or do you have others that you use in order to keep this collection?
Absolutely. I never had any credence or belief in journaling until about maybe 10 years ago. And before that, I was writing stuff down on pieces of paper, folding it, putting it in my pocket, and then losing it.
Washing it.
Washing it. Right. And I was like, geez, I wish I had those 3 things I wrote down that could help me today, 6 months later or 3 months later or a year later. So once I got a book and put it in that book, something happened. I was able to look back, document those things, and then look back when an idea strikes me. I don't have to necessarily write, a full page of notes or a full page of, just a recollection of things, but just jotting down how I felt, what I noticed, what I observed, and, maybe some takeaways. And I take that with me, everywhere I go.
That's cool. And it's ironic that you're holding my journal right now
right.
to use as a notepad today.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. I'm gonna save that page. I'm gonna have you sign it at the end of this. That would be really cool. Another idea, and I like that you said metaphysical, and I'd love for you to expand on this, is also being present in those moments. So I think about when I'm watching a movie, even for entertainment. So forget about the documentary movie. Like just think about the blockbuster movie, right? I'm being present and to the production of the film, the editing of the film. And this is because this is like our world, right? Like whoever you are watching or listening to this right now, your world might be something different. But what is it that you can take from the film? What is it that you can take from this experience with friends or out in the wilderness or wherever you are, right? Even in the city, the skyscraper, whatever it is that you're looking at. What I'm getting to is to be present in that moment. Is that when you're present in that moment and you're really taking it all in, that's when you're really filling your vessel, right? Because if you're just there and you're just, blurting out things or just not being present, thinking about your, what's happening in your phone in terms of text, social media, whatever the rest, or, your head's down or whatever it is, your head's in the clouds, really, like what everybody says, then you're not taking in the experience. And it's almost like you got a cap on that vessel and you're not allowing all of this to flow inside of you. Whereas when you're present and you're really taking it in, and I think that what I'm also want to say here is that there's some intentionality behind it of, I want to get some entertainment and some joy out of this, and I also want to see how this is going to apply to the stories I create.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I almost think of it like you're watching a movie and someone's talking in the background and it's a little distracting, and you don't hear some important dialogue that's setting you up for something later. And if you miss that, and later on in the movie you're like, what is going on? I have no idea, no clue. It's because you were maybe focused or distracted at that period of time. And I think sometimes the world is set up so that we are distracted by a lot of different things. But if we maybe pause and focus for a sec and tune in, then I think we can get some of those different dimensions of experiences so that we fill our vessel in a more impactful way. And the other thing is too, like if we are concentrating on, other things and someone says, throughout our day, and then someone says, hey, how was your day? What did you do? And you're like, wait a minute, what did I do? I was on my phone, checking my phone most of the time. I missed a lot of signals and things that, throughout my day because I really wasn't present. So I think it's important to stop. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen to me.
Sure.
There are times when I could certainly be more present, but it's something that I'm trying to be more aware of and trying to develop as a communicator, but as a better listener.
I think just the awareness of whether we're being present or not is sometimes just enough. Because, one thing is, and we're going to get into the entrepreneurial journey here, is nobody's perfect. And I think the biggest fear to become an entrepreneur or a leader, which we're going to talk a little bit more about now, is the biggest fear is that we strive for perfection. And I know because I was in a corporate job for many years, multiple corporate jobs, right? But the point is like I was in a corporate job for many years, but I always knew I wanted to start a business. And actually, I have to bring this up because literally just had this conversation 2 days ago with my coach. It's funny, I fought being an entrepreneur for probably about 15 years or so. And even when I quit my job and started a business, started Den 10 and started Michael Esposito Inc., even when I did all that, I still didn't consider myself an entrepreneur. And the irony in all of this, and what I'm sharing right now, is that 4 years later after quitting my corporate job, I'm speaking with my coach on Wednesday, Merritt, always a big shout out to her. She's awesome. And I was saying to her something along the lines, and it gave me a flashback of a memory I had. And the memory was one of my first interviews I had after I graduated college. And it was with New York Life. So I didn't take the job with them. This was before my very first job, which was with Yellow Book, right? So this is my very first interview. And I vividly remember the guy behind the desk asking me, what do you want to do with your life? And me saying, I want to open up a pizzeria. Like, I want to be a business owner. I want to own a business, and I wanted pizza. And this is why we had that conversation, because it was like, do something you love. And I said, I always loved pizza. So I wanted to open up a pizzeria because I was like, I could eat pizza every day of the week.
Right.
So even if my pizzeria is not successful, I'm good because I'll have breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the week. I'll be good. I bring that story up because I always knew, and then I kind of buried it. And then I took the corporate job. I worked for Yellow Book and many other companies later on, and I buried it. Why did I bury it? And a lot of it had to do with fear. I was afraid of the outcome of, will I be perfect? Will I create a perfect business? Will I create a business that's successful? Will I be a successful leader? And I think that so many dreams and hopes are kind of like discarded because we strive for perfection. So I bring this back, and then we're going to jump back into the whole entrepreneur and leadership thing. To self-awareness is not about being perfect. Being present is not about being perfect. It's about just being in that moment for what it is. And maybe that moment is to read that text message or to see that social media post. But as long as you're aware that you're doing that, cool.
Right.
Maybe now pick up your head and smell the roses.
Right, exactly. Or smell the pizza.
That's right, man. I freaking love pizza. I like a good, all right, let's get into pizza for a second here, people. I like a good hard crust.
Okay.
And then, like gooey cheese and a good tasty sauce. How about you?
Oh, sauce I think is like the most important
That's the key.
thing. I really love sauce, red sauce.
The reds. Does it matter if the pizza kind of flops, or do you like it like a nice hard crust?
Hard crust.
Hard crust. All right. So we're good New York City pizza lovers here. All right. Good. Let's talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey, because I feel like this is a perfect springboard for that, is that one of the biggest issues with becoming an entrepreneur, becoming a leader. So, you don't have to be an entrepreneur for this conversation. You could just be thinking about your next promotion, moving into management, getting to the C-suite. There's this fear of perfection. There's this fear of that takes over many of us. And you're an entrepreneur. Now, I'd love to get into your backstory on how you became an entrepreneur and opened up Michael Roach Creative. So maybe take us there. But really what I'm getting at here is, what helped you take the leap to start your own boutique, to start your own business?
Wow. Yeah. It takes me back to my high school days. I went to an all-boys school in the Bronx, New York.
Oh, what school?
Yeah, Mount St. Michael Academy.
Well, I went to Archbishop Malloy, another all-boys school.
Oh, okay.
Well, past was, now it's a co-ed school.
Okay, yeah.
So I share your pain.
And yeah, it was a good experience. I do miss those days. At the time, I was like, these are the worst days of my life at the time. But looking back, it's like, reminisce, right? And so that's kind of where I started my first business. I started a book bag art business. I bought a drawstring book bag because we had them at the school, and it had, the Mount St. Michael logo on one side and the other side was blank. So I took a fabric marker and I decided to do it up with a bunch of art. And so someone said, "Hey, where'd you get that? You did that, Michael?" And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "Could you do one for me?" And I was like, ding, 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 ding. And light bulb went off. And I was like, maybe I could turn this into a business opportunity. So that was like my first situation in starting a, business. And so fast forward into about 2013, part of my life when I was kind of in between jobs and in between career choices, that's when I started the firm. And I started the firm because I had been working with people on a freelance basis to help them grow their businesses with marketing, but also design and some of the creative stuff that they were working on in their own businesses. But I wanted to work with people on a more long-term basis, less freelance. Freelance is great, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to really build some relationships and be more strategic about it. So that's kind of why I wanted to open my firm. And I felt like it was the perfect vehicle to not just do stuff, but also be an advisor or consult people, business owners, entrepreneurs who are also at different times in their lives at crossroads, thinking about starting a new endeavor or, wanting to expand on that creative idea that they had and turn it into a business.
I'm curious in the Catholic school world because I didn't graduate Archbishop Malloy. I ended up having to leave. We'll keep that part out of the podcast. Okay. I've shared it before. Go back and listen to one of my previous ones. I graduated Bayside High School. But knowing the Catholic school world, at least the one that I was in, so I went to Archbishop Malloy in Queens, and it was super strict. So there was all these guidelines to our dress code.
Oh, yeah.
And if you did anything, and you know where I'm going with this with your bag, if you did anything that was somewhat creative, it was almost you got slapped on the wrist or were discouraged to do it. I'm curious, was it encouraged or discouraged, or was there somebody, a mentor at that age that kind of encouraged this art that you were doing?
Well, no one really complained at the school about the book bags.
That's interesting. So you were taking St. Michael book bags and changing them.
Yeah, I was turning them around and then drawing on the blank side.
And they didn't say anything. Interesting.
Yeah, no one.
I got detention for not having my top button buttoned. I was very upset by this.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. The things they did complain about, you had to have a tie every day.
Yes.
You couldn't go without it, having a button open, forget it. That was like detention, calls for detention. You had to be clean shaven. Now, really, looking back, we're, and boys growing up in our teens, and we had to be clean shaven. It's like that was a challenge for many of us.
Right.
No sideburns. So it was, it was tough. That part was tough. We had to be, sometimes have a jacket or a sweater, clean shoes, really look professional.
Right. Right.
And so, and thinking about how that's
exactly what I'm thinking about when you're telling me about this bag that has artwork on it.
Right. And so when I did the bag, it was just like, well, okay, if I have to be professional and all right, I have to wear this tie and I have to wear these slacks and all these different things, how can I stand out and just be my own person? And I think the bag was kind of how I did that. That was my vehicle for that. And then when other people wanted that, they wanted aspects of themselves, something unique, because we kind of all felt like we were really couldn't stand out.
It was sterile.
Yeah, it was a little sterile. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And so, and at that time of our lives too, we also were, I would say, experimenting in that, we're trying to find ourselves, like, where's our voice, and, are we actually leaders, So, so I was delightful, feeling very grateful that I was able to kind of help do that in a creative way for a lot of friends at my school, but also friends at other schools too. And this kind of grew where, people were saying, "Hey, my girlfriend needs a bag too. Do one for her." And so it kind of started to see it around the Bronx, a lot of bit. So,
what were you charging for these bags?
$20 to start, and then if we wanted more, I did that with one color, and if you wanted multiple colors, it would be $25 and $30.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So you had this. So it wasn't discouraged. So that's not what put it out.
Right.
What was it? Graduation. What ended this kind of business for you?
It was graduation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what's next? So, but I mean, I still was drawing, and I was doing I did move to T-shirts. So I was doing T-shirts for a while. And at one point I was thinking about airbrushing. I was like, do I really want to get into that? And I didn't. But I started to build an fascination for graphic design. And that kind of started me into, the other part of
graphic design.
Yeah.
So you ended that business. Now, when you developed it as a business, and I'm asking this for all of you listening, I'm asking this because you might be in this stage, right? This might be a side hustle. It might be a hobby that you're doing right now. Maybe you're working a corporate job and you're doing something on the side, some Etsy type of project, or this is something that you want to get into and you want to see how to expand it. So I'm asking this intentionally for that reason for those people listening right now. You're calling it a business, right? What were some of the things or components that you realized looking back on it that made it a business? So we had a product, we had a price point, you even had a variety of price points. What were some other things that you were doing on a very obviously a high school scale, right? Like you're 16 through 18 years old doing this. What were some of the other things that made it feel like a true business for you?
Well, looking at my equipment, my costs, and I had to go shopping for those markers because they would run out. They were great, these fabric markers, but I had to go to a special place, Pearl Paint, down in Canal Street, down in Manhattan. So I had to think about, okay, am I charging enough? And at the time, it felt like it made sense. Now I think it would be charging a completely different amount, but also, I was thinking about, the customer experience. If once I did like a draft on paper, I would say, is this kind of like what you're looking for? They're like, yes. Okay. And then I would move to the next stage. I wouldn't just do something on the book bag and then they'd say, I don't like this. So working with the customer, asking them what they think, getting their feedback for what they want, what they're looking for, and making sure that it was something that they, were delighted about. The other piece was advertising. And so I felt like my book bag was the billboard of what I was trying to sell. So I wore that book bag everywhere. I was on the train, I was on the bus, I was walking, and people were like, where did you get that from? And so that was kind of how I, got the word out.
Oh, that's cool. So you were storyboarding from the very beginning.
Yes, basically.
I mean, that's essentially it.
Yeah.
So I love that. So kind of putting all of that together of, I just mentioned it of, you have this product, you have the product and it's right on your bag. It's your bag. And, that's the viable product that everybody sees. It's the billboard for it. So we see that. You have your price points, as we mentioned. You have your other things, your expenses, which are your markers, the travel, which you probably didn't take into account to Canal Street. It was probably just a fun day out. And then now you have this whole layout for your customer of the draft, the storyboard. Do you approve this? Can we move forward? So you built out this whole process, maybe unknowingly at the time,
yes,
right? But as you look back, I mean, for all of you listening, this is really how you start a business. This is part of the components of starting the business. So I go back to this whole fear thing, is that when we see it through these eyes of this 16-year-old Michael at St. Michael's, right? Being interviewed by Michael on the Michael Esposito show.
Right.
All the Michaels in the world align right now.
Totally.
When you think back at it, it almost removes the fear, I hope, for everybody, right? Where it's like, hey, you can start, but just start somewhere, right? Just start with something, right? I feel like that's what I get from your story is just start with something. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, if you ever want to get motivated, if there's someone out there that's listening and wants to get motivated and wants to feel inspired, just do a search. You'll probably find some young individual that's starting a business and they're doing it from their front yard. They are, really motivated, or maybe they created a project, they're working on building websites, they started an agency, they're doing something, they invented something. Just see a young person doing that. And it's not to make you feel bad and say, oh, I'm X years old and wow, a young person is doing that. No, I think it could help as a piece of fuel to get you to start that thing that you've been talking about or dreaming about. And making it happen. Really.
That's right. I mean, the Colonel from KFC, big story for him, right? He started when he was in his 60s or landed when he was in his 60s.
Mm-hmm.
I think about the comedian, No Respect. Oh my goodness.
Rodney Dangerfield.
Yes. Who had a career in aluminum siding. So there you go. So many people don't even know this, but he had a career in aluminum siding. He wasn't following his dream, his path. He had done some stand-up comedy, got married, had a family, and had to put food on the table. So he went back to aluminum siding sales, and eventually was just like, this is terrible, and got back into comedy. So you're never too old, because he was older. He was in his, I believe, 40s or 50s when he got back into comedy. And I mean, everybody knows him only as a comedian, right?
Yes.
But he was selling siding. So you're never too old. I like that you say that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that it makes me think of like some of the clients that I work with. They're not in their 20s. And not to say that I won't ever get a 20-year-old client, but a lot of folks that tend to work with me tend to be, a little bit senior in their, 60, 70, even 80s. So, it's just seeing that makes me feel great. And it reinforces that idea that you're never too old, to learn something new, to even do something that may not have any true business or revenue generating value, like learning to play the piano, because maybe that's the thing you need outside of business to help you smell the roses.
That's right.
Feel more comfortable. The other point I wanted to mention too is that in addition to creating the business in high school with the book bags, I also was looking at someone and them starting their business and working on their business. And that person was my father. He was a welder, he was a construction worker, but he was also an artist. And he was always drawing. And he was more of a painter. I would say oil painting was definitely his thing, but he had a side business too. And I kind of took some cues from him, and he was saying, Michael, you always have to have something to fall back on. And I always remembered that. But I also saw how hard he worked on his other business, his side business. And he created window gates, fences with steel, with welding, and just seeing him draw up the designs for that, and then starting with a creative idea on paper and then turning that into something hard that kept things safe, or kept people out, or kept, dogs out, or something like that, or, kept people in, was just a great example to see for him to model to me.
Yeah, those examples, those mentors in our lives, I have one myself. My uncle was also, or is, an entrepreneur, a business owner for many years. And he was like the model of the businessman for me, of like, I know that this is the path I want to choose. And my sister followed my father and my uncle, and my other uncle, in medicine. I think that, as kids, there's always this person that we see. And, for you, it was your dad. I have a couple questions in terms of the art behind all of this. So one, the book bags. Do you have pictures of them?
Oh, man.
Oh, man, you're in trouble, man. You're in trouble. How did you not take a picture of that backpack?
Oh, if I had a phone.
I know, yes. And there was no Amazon back then either, everyone. That's why he took the train to Canal Street.
Right, exactly. There may be something floating around on a Facebook group for the Mount St. Michael Academy.
Oh, my goodness. We got to find that,
I have to find something.
That's awesome.
Ask some of my friends to see if they have a bag.
I love that. Something that we talk a lot about in our spaces is transferable skills. We think about, it's interesting because, I'm saying we talk about it a lot in our spaces, but I was just on a call not too long ago, and there was a gentleman who just came out of the military, was in the military for many years. And so I'm in a public speaking group for keynoters and things of that nature. And he's starting his public speaking career journey. And in the group, I guess we can call it a mastermind, he was on the hot seat, and the reason why was he was asking, he goes, I've been in the military for over 20 years, for most of my life, and I don't know, what to speak about, or I don't know how to connect with an audience. And he wasn't saying that in a way of like he doesn't know how to speak in public. He was saying, what do I have to offer? I just came from the military and here I am, and what am I going to speak to you about? And I was blown away by this because this person, I'm going to get it all wrong, so I'm not going to use the names of what he was, but he was a leader in the military. He was, a high-ranking officer who had people that reported to him, and he led them in 3 different tours, I believe in Iraq. And so it was interesting to me that he's in this forum with people like myself who literally have just worked a corporate job and didn't realize the transferable skills that he had from leading people in war, right? From rising the ranks in a system that you talk about structure, right? You talk about getting detention for not getting your buttoned or not wearing a tie. I mean, from rising in the ranks there, overcoming so many different adversities and challenges and everything, and then not realizing that he had transferable skills. This is an example. And I think for everyone listening right now, we so often forget the transferable skills we get just from starting a side hustle. And I say all of this because you made these backpacks and you were doing all of this art. And then you said it's what led you into graphic design. And so I think back to the word transferable skills, or the idea of transferable skills, of you were doing something and how did you transfer those skills into graphic design? So the question here really for you is, when you did decide to get into graphic design, how did you see that side hustle, that business of creating backpacks? How did you see, or what did you take from that and apply it into graphic design? And how did you see that come together?
Wow. I see that as almost kind of an evolution. It was at first, I think I was a little skeptical of computers because I was like, well, I need to draw everything. I don't want to design stuff on the computer. And then once I did some more research to understand like how computers were used to do layout, to do designs, to do illustrations, and I was like, wait a minute, this is just a different way for me to do some of the same thing, but in a different audience, or with a different audience, or in a different arena, with different people to maybe appreciate it and to communicate with a whole other, set of folks. So I was like, I want to explore that. The curiosity was kind of maybe the bridge. And I think that a lot of times people are curious, and maybe there's someone that is not around to bring that out of them and say, hey, the thing that you did before, you could totally do that. And here are the ways that you could do that. Check this out and check this out. And I think I was doing that through my own research, through myself. But in that person that you were talking about, those transferable skills, I think maybe it's something like talking together, they need someone to say, hey, all those things that you did, or many of those things that you did, they totally apply. They just work in a different way. Instead of working horizontally, maybe they're vertical now, or maybe they're 3-dimensional. And here are some ways that you could do that. And as you continue to grow and expand on those things and learn more and fill that vessel, then you're going to be wonderful. You're going to impact so many people with what you have to share, especially from a leadership point of view. So I think we will evolve eventually if we open ourselves up to those things and being curious, asking those questions, and doing some research. And I would say being a little vulnerable and saying, geez, I don't know everything. I don't know this. And there is a lot of fear in that, and not knowing, of course, right? But you have others that have done it. You can always ask them. And there are going to be some people that are not going to share that information with you. But you're eventually going to find your people if you keep searching. And if you surround yourself with people that are open, honest, capable people that have talent and skills that you appreciate, then they're really going to help you, excel at what you're doing.
Yeah. And again, just to kind of like add to that is the whole idea of experimenting, right? Is in all of it is it's, again, I go back to Adam Grant because I'm loving him right now. He talks about applying everything as a scientist, just experimenting with everything. And so the side hustle, by experimenting with it, by experimenting with the hobby, by being curious, everything you just said, you're going to learn something from it. And it's either going to be the business or it's going to help you in the next business or in the next phase of your life. Couple questions about your dad.
Yes.
So you mentioned artist, oil paintings, and all the rest.
Uh-huh.
You have spoken a lot about the client experience. And you've said it so many times over about making sure that, from the book bags being right to them. You've talked about the client experience with your clients. You just said it again just now in terms of the client experience and just creating this amazing client experience. And so you have this this value in making sure that your outcomes impact somebody in such a positive way. And I'm just curious in terms of your father, and since he was part of the inspiration to you starting, who was he selling to, and what did you witness in the way that he was selling his art to others and the experience that he was providing for them?
Yeah, the thing that I noticed with him was he asked a lot of questions. He didn't just walk in and say, I'm the expert here, this is what's going to happen. No, he really took time to listen. And, of course, about my dad, I always remember the stare that he gave me when I did something wrong, but he didn't give people that stare. Thank goodness. No, he tuned in. I could see him say, yes. And he asked these questions to see what they were looking for and what made them call him to put up these fences or gates and things like that. Or in terms of selling his art, he was, just trying to be open to the experience of, trying to see what others might be interested in, in terms of his sculptures with the metal, and he did metal sculptures as well. But asking questions was like the biggest thing that I noticed, and him listening and him being patient, which I didn't always see from that perspective, at home. It was just in a different way. And I was like, wow, my dad can, just almost put on a different hat. And, he was, fun at times, very strict, of course, in a Caribbean household. But also he was, very pensive and attentive too when he was talking with his clients and customers.
Yeah, I think you mentioned being a leader and the qualities of a leader. And I think we forget that listening is one of the biggest qualities a leader has. And I think it's Simon Sinek's story that he talks about. He had spent some time with the tribe, and he had witnessed how the tribe kind of was sitting around and speaking. And he noticed that the tribe leader wasn't speaking. And he was just curious, as Simon Sinek is, for those who know who he is. And he was curious, what's going on here? This guy's the tribe leader. He hasn't said a word yet.
Right.
And what he took from it, because I don't remember it word for word, but what he took from it was this leader and him had a conversation about it, and he was saying, I have to hear what everybody's voices and opinions are first before I can really lead them or show them the way. And I think that we forget that as leaders. Is we think that we have to be the voice. We have to be the one to give the vision, to give the ideas, to give everything. And everybody's supposed to or expected to follow. Where it's really the reverse. I think when selling an idea or getting a team to buy into something, it's to learn what's driving them. You hired them for a reason. You trust them for a reason.
Yeah.
So what's driving them? What is it that they see? What's the vision that they see? And then how does it relate to your vision? And that's, to me, how you get them to buy in. And so when I think about what you're saying about your dad and asking questions and listening, I think that that's so foundational to being a great leader, of asking so many questions. And so it kind of goes back to this whole customer experience of how can you provide a great customer experience if you don't know your customer?
Right.
And the only way you can know your customer is if you ask them 100 questions, right? It's so funny, the customers that, in selling insurance, I have to ask a lot of questions. And it's so funny, the clients that get so abrasive about it or upset. And I'm like, I can't help you if I don't know about you. And I want to help you. So I need to learn what's going on there. And then I need to sit back and listen. And that's how we can provide the best customer experience, right?
Yeah, totally agree. Making some observations. Sometimes I find myself when I'm with a client, just, observing them. I literally was just on a trip observing a client and seeing them in their space when they were excited to see their customers and, how they smiled and how their customers were literally in a line to go see them and buy from them on a Saturday afternoon. Was like, now I understand what makes this business tick and why people love them. And I want to help bring that out. And just having my client tell me that wouldn't have been the same. I had to go see it for myself. So observing that client along with the asking of the questions. But yeah, that just created a different mindset for me. It helped me see things much more clearer.
Yeah, and I think it goes to, again, back to this whole idea of building out a business is, again, as entrepreneurs or as creatives, anybody who's working a job right now and have a side, whatever it is, right, as creatives, we have a vision of what we want to create. We have an idea of what we want to create. But does it resonate with people around us? We can fight tooth and nail to make a backpack that sells right. or a product or a widget that sells. Because we really believe in it and we love it and it's our passion and we can just kind of like pigeonhole it into the market. But if we truly want to be successful and if we truly want the outcomes we desire, we need to know what the client wants.
Right.
What are they looking for? Who are they? What do they look like? And I think some of the best podcast interviews I have, and you asked it to me and I asked it to you of like Hudson Valley Meetup, and we're going to talk about that as well, is who am I speaking to, right? Like, what does your audience want? Right. And you asked me a couple questions, I think, prior to coming on, and we had some conversations about what does your audience want? What do they need from this conversation? And that shows me that you care about the outcome of this, because it's not necessarily about you and me talking, although we're building and establishing a relationship here. Yeah. It's about what's the outcome? What do they want, right? And if we don't know what they want, then we almost don't know what to give. And, I asked it for you, and we'll talk about Hudson Valley Meetup now, is, you're going to have me on as a presenter for one of your meetups. Yes. And I want you to share more about that. And, that's my question for you is, I know what I can share. I have different avenues to go in terms of communications and leadership and all different areas, networking and all the rest, right? But what do they want? Because if I go in there and I'm speaking about communication tips and public speaking tips about how to get on stage, and meanwhile I'm speaking to a bunch of introverts who just want to be, really great leaders in their organization, right. Well, that was pointless.
Right, exactly.
Right? It's so important to know what they want.
Right. And so in that sense, paying attention to, entrepreneurs are really struggling with, maybe some of the things that they say in conversations with me or that I overhear. And I've spent a lot of time in the entrepreneur community, not just as, working with them in their marketing, but also mentoring entrepreneurs, going to startup events and seeing people pitch, being actually a judge in some cases for maybe starting a business. It was like an event where you had 54 hours to start a business. And it was like, okay. And I have to give you some advice on how to, present this and pitch it and position it and, talk about your product. So spending time in that community and keep spending time in the community, asking people questions and observing. I'm trying to get a sense of what people want across the Hudson Valley. And I'm finding that in general, people want more business, but they also want to feel good about what they do. And from community to community, throughout this 150 miles that I'm trying to cover here, in their different towns, in their different surrounding cities, municipalities, there's different environments where people are dealing with challenges, issues that I might not know about. So I'm really asking them, I'm paying attention to their news and the things that they're sharing. And so it's helpful to just kind of almost hear from them, like what's impacting them. Some people are dealing with housing as a form of, or housing, but also trying to live in the community that they're trying to start their business in. or dealing with regulations or even parking issues, or even, just like the economics of their environment or setting up a marketplace, hearing what people's challenges are, opportunities to network. And so opportunities to network was that was like the one thing that I constantly heard over and over. And people want to network, and sometimes in many cases, they don't know how to. They don't know. They feel like, oh my goodness, I'd rather go to the dentist today and get an extraction than get in a room with other people and tell people about myself. And I wanted to find a way to bring people together, get them networking, but also have them make connections that are going to build some results, some business results for them.
And so what you're speaking to is Hudson Valley Meetup, right? And how you started creating it. So I think for everybody listening here is that you created an online group called Hudson Valley Meetup, and you have several chapters, from what I understand, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And in this group, there's a lot of education involved in it. You have guest speakers come on. You'll have me coming on in April 30th. Everyone, I'll be on Mike's Hudson Valley Meetup. But you've had many others come in, great experts come in and share advice. And there's this networking component to it all of people getting to know and meet each other in this. So I guess that's kind of like the foreground for everybody to understand. But to carry on what you were just saying in the need for networking, you mentioned that there's a lot of people out there, and I've met them too, and we talk about the introverts and even extroverts who networking is over their heads. It's overwhelming. It's nerve-wracking. They don't know what to do, what to say. In your experience of creating this group, what have you gained in terms of knowledge on how to help people overcome some of these or help them subside their fears?
Right. So some of the things that I've noticed is that if there are some folks that are a little uncomfortable, they will literally recede, and they're happy to recede because it's comfortable for them. And I understand that. I've been there. They're happy to recede because then they feel like they don't have to talk so much about themselves. Maybe they're just uncomfortable. So I'm looking for that person that is maybe receding, and I want to bring them into the conversation because I know everybody has some value to share. They have something that another person will find really interesting, or something that that could support them in what they're doing. So I encourage people, like, I see someone that's being a little bit quiet, not to put them on the spot, but say, well, what do you think? I heard you mention, this piece about, X early on in the conversation, and I'll try to bring that back and try to bring them into the conversation so that they feel more included. The other thing I'll try to do, if there's a chance, is look at people's bios as they're signing up, and then, knowing something about them and using that as part of the conversation or the questions that I ask everybody, so that we all feel like we're getting some value out of it and we have some sort of contribution to make in the talks that we do. And some of the events that we do are in person. Some are virtual and some are in person. Some are morning coffee networking things, and I've done some evening things. And, it's really these three groups from the Upper Hudson Valley, from Albany, the Mid Hudson Valley, and the Lower Hudson Valley, like down in Westchester area. And all three groups are slightly different, but really people, the thread that's in between them are people that want to make connections and they want to grow. They want to learn something, and they want to share resources like books and, new areas to look at, to expand in their business, or other events to attend. So I just want to be a community builder, not a strength that I wanted that I saw as something I wanted to grow, but I was like, wait, I don't feel comfortable there. Let me check into that. Let me experiment. Let me get curious about community building. And that's kind of how that started, and almost by accident, but I kind of leaned into it, even though it is a little uncomfortable for me to be a community builder, to be a host, to invite people in and, ask people questions and get them excited about, their day. Spend a little time with them and, just observe them too.
You mentioned a couple things that I kind of want to reflect back for everybody here. And it kind of answers the question of developing relationships. And you mentioned reading their bios. I think finding connections with each other, when we can find these little connections, and in terms of networking, in terms of getting to know other people, forget about all the other noise and forget about, what you're pitching, what your business is, what their business is, all that stuff. Find that connection and stay there for a little while. If you both like the Yankees, talk about the Yankees for a little bit. Get to know each other on that level playing field of connection. And then from there, it'll kind of deviate to, well, what do you do and what do I do? I think that, that's kind of, when you're talking about the bios, I think you can learn a lot about somebody in a bio and just find something that connects. And I truly believe everybody has a connection somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And a couple other things that you said is there's already a commonality. When we're thinking about networking, there's a commonality across the board, not just in your Hudson Valley meetup groups, but just across the board, is that the people are there to grow. Whether it's to grow through their development in their intellectual skills or their development in their business skills or acumen, they might be there to just grow their business. But there's a commonality.
Yes.
And so find that commonality and be curious. And I think you said that many times too. And I think that curiosity is, you don't always have to walk in the room and be the light of sunshine. You don't have to be the one holding the mic. You can be curious and ask questions just like you did. And so I think when we're thinking about networking and feeling overwhelmed, what if you just walked in and rather than felt overwhelmed, you just felt curious and just asked a bunch of questions? Because what's also really interesting about this is that so many times the people that find you most interesting are the people that you just quizzed the whole time, right? Because they got to talk about themselves and they're like, darn, that guy is really interesting. It's like, I didn't tell you anything about me yet, right? So I think that these are all really, really cool things and foundations to help people in terms of networking. And one other thing I'll mention from my own personal experience with networking that I wanted to bring up, because this has happened to me recently, is I enjoy networking. Love networking, love meeting new people, love learning about what they're up to, what they're doing, sharing my experiences, kind of going back and forth, very similar to this podcast, right? Love, 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 love. But more recently, I haven't. I haven't enjoyed networking as much. And I've been reluctant to actually attend networking events. And this isn't because I'm nervous or overwhelmed by the networking experience. It's because I'm not clear on my message. And so I think it's very important for all of you listening and in this conversation that we understand that when we don't have clarity on why we're there and who we want to speak with and what our message is, what are we selling, what are we doing?
Right.
That can also be part of why we're feeling anxious. I know that that's my issue right now because I don't have those other issues, but that could be what your issue is, right? It could be, for you listening, that is, right? Could be what your issue is, that maybe you don't know who your ideal client is. Maybe you don't know what your message is. Maybe you don't know why you're there. And I would say, then find out some answers to that. Because that once you have that clarity, then you're gonna have a reason to be at these networking events. And that will help subside some of those nerves as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like some networking events more than others. But what I'm trying to do is create a space for people to try their positioning, in those groups, on those meetings. Tell me who you are and what you do, and you might change it from week to week or when we do our events, and it's going to evolve over time. And maybe you're not clear, and maybe I think that's something that I can help some people with. And maybe putting together a script, and not that they're going to say the script every time, but they might deviate from it or add a little spin to it. But I think having some of that clarity is something that can't happen all at once. It's something that's going to have to evolve over a period of time. And just like a business evolves over a period of time, the things that I'm doing today, I didn't expect that I'd be doing or building those same skills when I first started out. Right? So I expect that some people might have some anxieties over networking because they're not sure or have that clarity. But every opportunity that you get, it's a chance to, I wouldn't say perfect it, but refine it, make it tighter, make it better so that you feel comfortable, but also confident when you say, I do these things and I created a business and it's, you have to really own it. Right. So that's why I feel that people in my spaces can practice that so that when they go out and come back to my events or when they go out to other events that they've already are building those skills and just refining those things.
And I'll add, and why you're doing it, right? I mentioned Simon Sinek before and reading his book, something starting with why. And it's all of the things that you mentioned and why.
Right.
Why is this important? Because when we hear the old adage of people buy from people buy from people because of their why, right? Because what makes you different? It's the passion. It's what you see inside of that person, and that's the why. So I'd like to just add that.
Yes.
Kind of just wrapping this whole thing around leadership is kind of where I want to go with this now with you, because you mentioned it before of back in high school, where these young kids, ambitious kids, and we all wanted to be leaders. And I think about, the stories that you've shared with us today of, starting this backpack art company, graphic design, being a contractor, and then soon starting your own business, and then starting Hudson Valley Meetup. In every area here, you were a leader. Whether you viewed yourself as a leader or not, doesn't matter, you were. And I'm just interested in your view on leadership. And when you look at it in these different moments in your life, maybe the different leader that you saw in yourself, or maybe the different components of leadership that you saw that you had, or attributes that you had. Be interested if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure thing. Looking at leaders, people that were in leadership positions, noticing some of their characteristics that I liked or didn't like, participating on boards even when I was with the American Marketing Association, and I'm also on a chamber board right now, just noticing how people communicate and lead people to do other things. We have a goal in mind. We all have a shared goal, but how are we going to get there? And the person who is going to be the person that motivates all of us to do it. And almost, we know it's work, but how does that person almost make us feel that this isn't work? This is something that we feel really passionate about. So in all of the things that I've done, I've always been looked at leaders and looked at some of the things that, maybe help them lead other people, or some of the things that really didn't help. Made, in some cases, a toxic environment, or made people afraid to speak out or voice their opinion. It was like, I can identify that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to utilize some of those same kinds of tactics that that shut people down and keep people from voicing their opinion or feeling like they are included or part of a solution. So that was something that I had to do some reading on, had to do some research on about leadership and what does that look like, and then find good leaders, role models, people that were doing it well, and asking them questions like, how did you get the strength to lead us through this tough period in our chapter or in our chamber or in our group or with the organization that we were working in? What was that like? And so I'm really trying to absorb as much as possible and trying to be a learner. So I think that's helped me a great deal. And I'm not done learning. I'm ready to take in some more, of course. And, I'm learning from people as I go along, because I don't think my leadership journey is over. I think there's still a lot more that I need to take in. And, I'm still that vessel. So I'm ready to, be exposed to people and have them, educate me and learn from others.
I'm interested in why, and I know this is I'm just isolating what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that, that you have more to it than that, but you did say it. And so I want to kind of jump on it intentionally.
Okay.
Why you chose asking the leader what their strength was to get through the hard time rather than what their strength was to maybe expand or get through the good times. So I'm interested in the focus on getting through the hard time.
Mm-hmm.
Why did that stand out for you?
That stood out for me because it's not easy, right? It's challenging. It's almost like you're fighting against your impulse to react to something, or something that someone said to you that made you feel a certain way or made you feel sideways. It's like, how did you restrain yourself and say, I hear what you're saying, and make that person feel heard, and then still gather people around to get the job done or get the mission done and make us feel like we're included so that we could get past this tough period in time.
Mm-hmm.
So not to say that it's easy. I think maybe it's a little easier when things are going great and people are happy and, it's a big love fest. Sure. And I think that takes skill too, because, we have to get there, but how do you get there? There are going to be times when you have a great team even, and maybe there's one person that's changing the dynamics of it. How does that leader deal with that? I'm always curious about how do you change that dynamic so that, what one person might upset the balance. How do you get that person to also feel like they're part of the team, and so that everyone is, not that it has to be a love fest, but we're all trying to gather in on that shared goal.
I think it goes back to our conversation too of nothing's perfect, right? And when we think about leadership, there's nothing perfect in leadership. And so what you're saying in terms of this love fest where everything resembles perfection, there's still trouble behind the scenes. There's still challenges that got us to that perfect fundraiser event or to that perfect moment to where we hit our goal. There was a lot of challenges along the way. And so while we're headed towards this wonderful goal, how did you overcome this? How did you find the strength? How did you find the fortitude to be able to push forward and to not be reactive, but be responsive to everything? I think it's such a great question, right? Because it's really realizing that even the best leaders had challenges. And so how did they get through them? And that's why I want to kind of isolate that, because I really think that that's an important piece to understand of when we're discussing leadership, is that we could learn the blueprint of perfection, of greatness, right? We could all kind of learn the blueprint of what it is. But it's really in the challenges that we can start actually living out that blueprint, because every one of us is going to experience them. And every one of our leaders that we've witnessed have experienced challenges and had to overcome it. And it's like you said, how did they do it? And when you start learning about that, it's incredible. It's so eye-opening. And I think what you said there, and you used the word strength, and I think about the word resilience. And this year it was like, what's your word of the year? And for me, it was resilience. So it kind of resonates heavily with me in that to be resilient, to me, is like the mark of a true leader, is that, in the face of adversity, in the face of challenge, where were you? Were you cowering in a corner, or were you standing in front of the challenge and, doing everything you can to overcome it? Right.
Right. Yeah. And even maybe saying, I don't feel strong right now. I need help.
Right.
And that's so vulnerable, but people may not want to lean into that. But letting people know that it's okay, that you do actually need the help, that you need some support in that time. And, I think that's human. That's what makes us, right? Yeah. And so I think we all need a little bit of vulnerability. We also need confidence and strength and all those good things, and feeling certain and having clarity. But when that leader goes home and they take off their shoes, what's the first thing that comes across their mind? I feel so bad. Or, how do they feel inside? So I think it's important to feel, to think about those emotions, but also learn from some of those leaders when they're looking good, but also when things are not so great, right. When there are a lot of changes, change management, disruptions. How do they get through those times and help gather people for that shared goal?
Yeah. That's really, I mean, when we think about some of our greatest leaders, it's because they overcame just a mountain, right? So on the idea of leaders, you have a leader in particular who you quoted for a mantra for today, and I always like to bring up our mantra, and I love this guy. I love this guy. Although The Last Dance is making him look funny, but I mean, who didn't know this about him? And it's, I can accept failure. Everyone fails at something, but I can't accept not trying, and that's from our man, Michael Jordan. Let's go.
Oh yeah, totally.
That's my guy, man. I have a Michael Jordan poster in my office, and it's one that when I was a kid I had it up, and it's when he won the slam dunk contest from the free throw line. Yeah. And so I had it when I was a kid in my room. I had a bunch of Michael Jordan posters in my room, which I still have, by the way. I kept my stuff, man.
There you go.
I'm just speaking to a hoarder here.
Okay.
But anyway. And then later on, I was just like, I wanted some inspiration around my office. And, you see all these things like, strong will or whatever, and it's got like a ship or something. And it's so meaningless to me. I was like, I don't want to buy one of these corporate ones. And I just remember Michael Jordan jumping from the free throw line and dunking. Like, I just remember watching we had the tapes of the dunking contest and seeing Spud Webb and Dominique Wilkins and all that stuff. And then now we have YouTube and we can watch it all. But back then, like, it really resonated with me, and I grew up loving Michael. And so that's what I wanted. And I have a quote of his, which I wish I could remember off the top of my head right this moment. But I cut out a quote of his and I put it and I framed it all, and it's in my office. And like, that's my whole tribute to him. But also where I want to get to with you in this quote and what it means for you is knowing what he had to overcome in that dunk contest, and to jump from the free throw line 16 feet out from the basket to be able to dunk that ball. I mean, he was going up against Dominique Wilkins, called the human highlight reel. He was coming up against some really great, dunkers of his time. He was fresh in the NBA, and he had a lot of pressure on him to be able to win this dunk contest. And I believe it was in Chicago too, no less. So he had a lot of pressure on him to win this contest, and to face adversity, to overcome some difficulties and challenges, and dunk from the free throw line. So that's significant to me. Yeah. And you mentioned this quote here, and it just like follows this whole through line of accepting failure, and everyone fails, but he can't accept someone not trying. So tell us about that, what that means to you.
Yeah. I think there's something so powerful in trying. I do, in addition to working with adults, I also work with kids in helping them, learn to draw and draw different things, and with digital storytelling. And I find that sometimes kids can be very, in some cases, fearless, more fearless than adults. And it's like, that makes me wonder, like, what do we lose as we get older? In some cases, where a child might be like, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to try drawing this thing. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I've never drawn a hand before. I'm just going to try it, and it's going to look like a clown's hand, but and people might laugh. I'm just going to do it. And not every kid, but sure. Some children are just that fearless, and they're just willing to try it and see how messy it comes out the first time, and they'll try it again. And some adults that I work with, they're like, oh, no, I don't even want to get the paper out. I just know it's going to be a big mess. I can't draw a straight line. And they're saying all these things to defeat them before they even start. And so that trying, I think, is like the entryway to potential successes. Sometimes you might try and fail, but it might open up some other doorways, some other ideas for trying other things connected to what we just did. So again, that vessel being open to different experiences. And I think that experience of failure is really important. So I think we do need to absolutely fail at certain things. because there's some important lessons there that we have to learn to get on to the next thing that we're supposed to be triumphant with, because that's part of our story.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to fail at something and then learn from it and then get back on the horse or, whatever metaphor you need, but get back and try something again. Try anything, but do a thing,
I believe that failing at basketball is why I'm so passionate about it today. I started playing basketball with my neighbors when I was in, I want to say maybe 4th grade. And then I joined the CYO basketball team in 5th grade. And I did all right. I was all right. I was always a hustler. I was always working hard on the court. I didn't understand or know the game, but I played hard. My father, the people around me didn't play basketball, didn't watch basketball. I remember my uncle watching basketball every once in a while. But that was it. I didn't, I knew who Michael Jordan was, but we didn't have cable, and so I didn't watch it. And my father was an outdoors guy. We went skiing, hiking, and all the other outdoor stuff. He was like, "You're not sitting home watching TV." So I wasn't watching basketball either on TV, which now I've learned that could have taught me a lot when I was playing, right?
Yep.
So anyway, I'm sharing this because I went on to high school and I would start playing out in the courts and the outdoor courts, and and meeting people, just pick up basketball, and I go to high school. I go to Archbishop Malloy. Now, I don't know if you know much about Archbishop Malloy. You
not
don't, right?
a whole lot.
So Jack Curran was the coach of the time. Okay. He's a legendary coach. He's since passed. He's coached Kenny Smith, who you might know from TNT.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Kenny Smith came from Archbishop Malloy, and then Kenny Anderson was the next one, who you might know. Kenny Anderson was another one. And there was a couple other low-key NBA players that came out of Archbishop Malloy. So I was trying out for this team. I was trying out for this team. Not that my class had any NBA prospects in it, but I was trying out for this team in this program that was a highly ranked basketball program in the Archdiocese in Queens. I mean, people knew who they were if you went to that school, and they knew it for their basketball program. So, of course, I make it to final cut, and I made it to final cut, and my coach told me that because of my hustle, but I got cut. I got cut. So that was freshman year. Sophomore year, I think something's going to change. Something's new. Something's going to change. I go to the park every day. I'm practicing. Once again, make it to final cut, cut from the team. Man, I was devastated, right? And I remember I had all my Michael Jordan cards laid out like a shrine. I had all and I'm praying to Michael Jordan. I'm praying to the God of Michael Jordan. I'm like, I remember sophomore year, I was just like, Michael Jordan got cut from his basketball team his freshman year. So that doesn't tell my story. I'm just like him. Yeah. I'm going to make it the next year. Of course, I got cut. And of course, we find out that he got cut from the varsity team his freshman year, not the freshman team. Right. So I get cut JV. Junior year, again, something new is going to happen. I get cut again. Now I transfer to Bayside High School, which doesn't have the type of program that Malloy had. So I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to make this team. Nope, cut. So I got cut from all these basketball teams. But what I believe happened to me is that I had this love for the game. And I think I had already this passion. And I'm going to relate it back to the entrepreneurial story here for everybody listening and for where you are in your business and career. I had this passion for the game. I just loved it. I loved Michael Jordan. I loved watching him when I was able to watch him. I loved dribbling a ball. I remember going to my grandparents' house. They didn't have a hoop, but there was a ball in the hallway, and I just picked it up, and I would just be outside just dribbling. And so I had this passion for the game, and I loved it. And so every time I got cut, it was devastating for me. I could feel the emotion right now. It was devastating. It was just like, man. And I remember being bullied and being called names and, that I couldn't do it and all this stuff, but I still loved it, and I still played it. And today, I coach it. I run a basketball league. I play every single Sunday with an amazing group of guys, and I still get to play today, and I love it. And I look back at this experience of failure, like you were just saying, and I believe that failure is what drove me to be the basketball person that I am today, to look for different ways to expand my skill in basketball at 42 years old, to watch videos on how can I dribble better, how can I shoot better, how can I be a better teammate and set up plays on Sunday mornings, how could I be a great coach, what are some of the things that I'm going to do differently with the teams that I coach for my daughters and for their generation to be the best coach and the most supportive coach for them because I learned from these failures from growing into what I was back then. And so when I think about what we're talking about here, the entrepreneurial journey and business journey and in life, it's so similar in that if we're passionate about something and there's something that really we love and enjoy, to take the chance and to freaking fail at it, right? To just fall flat on your face. But what did you learn from it? And you mentioned it before, strength. What strength did it build? What resiliency did it build inside of you that you can take and go on to the next one and on to the next one and on to the next one, to where maybe it takes 20, 30 years to become great at it, but at least you got better at something that you love, you know? And I think about that with basketball. Like, you just triggered it when you, I mean, you brought up Michael Jordan. I blame you for this.
Well, no, that's a great topic to bring up in conversation, especially on a show like this, talking about Michael Jordan. But yeah, no, totally. I totally agree with you. I love that you point that out, that those experiences of, not making the team, it had an impact on your story today. And maybe who knows, if you did make the team then, your experience would be a little bit different than how you coach and play, these days.
That's exactly right.
And the other thing I'm thinking too is, like, we just never know what happens. A lot of times players get injured and, God forbid, and it's devastating to them because they're sidelined. And, when players get injured, they literally start, not all cry, but they're like really emotional about it. They're like, I can't do the thing that I love. And when I first saw it, I was like, wow, these are like 6 feet and up, kinds of guys and gals at different heights, and they get really emotional when they can't do the thing they love. And it's like, well, in business, some people get that way too. They can't do the thing that they love. They can't pay for that bill or to keep that service on or to feed their family in their business. And, they're maybe one customer away from that, whatever it is, that failure. How do you translate that into, I need to get up the next day and do this again? And, what happened today is not going to be my outcome for forever. I need to make a change. And what change are you going to make? Are you going to get back the next year and try again? Are you going to maybe help others? Are you going to inject yourself into conversations or into networking, learn some networking skills? So I think there's a lot of ways that we can participate and build our experiences as entrepreneurs, as professionals, or even if you're an employee working in a company. You are there learning something that's going to impact you later on in life or in that next role that you get. So even if you're at that desk and you're looking with your head down, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till 5. I've been there, but that experience is going to motivate you to do that next big thing that you're going to do.
Yeah. I love this. This has been, a really great conversation. And I love how I feel like we really talked a lot about how failure is almost like it's just part of the game. And I like how we kind of culminate it with Michael Jordan and just trying. Like, if you just try, right? Just try, people. Just freaking try, people. Right. This has been awesome getting to know you and learning so much more about what you do and Hudson Valley Meetup and all the different things that you're doing. I'd love for our audio listeners, of course, this will be in the show notes, if you could share all the different ways to connect with you, social, website, whatever it is that you want to share with everybody right now.
Sure thing. Folks can find me on my website, michaelroachcreative.com. I'm also on Facebook with the same details, michaelroachcreative.com on Facebook and Instagram. I can also be found. I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn company page for my business, Michael Roach Creative, but also for the Hudson Valley Entrepreneurs and Professionals Gathering. Meetup is a great place to find those events for the Hudson Valley meetups. So you can do a search there, and if you put in Hudson Valley, I should show up with my face, but not just my face. Lots of events and lots of members that really want to connect with you and help support you in what you're doing with your entrepreneurial journey. Even if you're in a company, there are folks there that as a creative and wonderful group of, sharing people that really want to exchange and help each other.
Yeah, and I think I want to add just to what you just said, even if you're in a company, because as an entrepreneur now, when I became an entrepreneur, I really started understanding the corporate life. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe, one, I'm unhireable now, but two, that if I were to go back into the corporate world, I have the cheat code. So I think that, right? I love it, right? I love your reaction to that.
Forget it.
Right?
It's a done deal. If I go into corporate,
we have the cheat code.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing because we actually understand how that mind operates now. I want to hear your opinion on it. Go ahead.
Oh, well, you open up a can of worms.
Say it. We didn't conclude yet, people. We got to touch this. We got to do it.
Okay. All right. So I'm based in the Albany area, right? So yeah, working in corporate and working in government and how people manage their time, their day. On this side of things as an entrepreneur, I'm like, I can see how a lot of time gets wasted, maybe not used as productive as possible, but there's so many opportunities to grow that people will just say, I don't need to do that. But I think there's with a little bit of stuff that you could do outside of corporate just to kind of level up a little bit, be that lifelong learner, ask people questions, find out who the leader is in the room or find out who other people are in the room and just be open and curious, then you can totally get the cheat code for corporate environments and really use them to your advantage. And maybe that corporate environment is not for you. Maybe there's a corporate environment that is for you, that playground that is going to feel like that 9 to 5 is going to feel like it was like 2 hours. You're going to just thrive and people are just going to come to you as the go-to person and say, I know I need to talk to you. And that's what makes you want to get up the next day.
That's awesome. So now you know where the cheat code is, michaelroachcreative.com. Go check it out and check out Hudson Valley Meetup. I'm delighted to be one of your guest speakers on the April 30th show.
Yes.
And just for everybody listening, you do this weekly, right? Or monthly, these spotlights?
So I do them across the month. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 times a month. Sometimes it's 3 times a month. Cool. For the Lunch and Learns, those webinars.
Yep.
The networking events are once or twice a month, and I try to do them throughout.
Awesome.
They're usually between Tuesdays and Thursdays because Mondays and Fridays I try to stay away from.
Yep. And I noticed that they're all on your website under events, so you can find them there, everyone. This has been an awesome interview with you. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.